everybody. I'm so excited. I have the Maggie Gill here with me. So I'm so excited. She's from Fira. She's actually tuning in from the UK. So what time is it there, Maggie?
So mid-morning, 11:30. So yeah,
Wow.
not
So
not
this
too
is
horrible.
8:05 for me. I'm just on my first coffee. So we're going to head to work right after this. So it's a really good way to start my day and a Friday at most. So that's fabulous, hanging out with you. So I met Maggie at the Bee Expo, and it was a rockin' expo. But I actually grabbed her and had supper with her with a few of my friends, and it was fabulous. All we did was laugh. I don't think any F-bombs were dropped on that conversation, but we were talking about it. But yeah, so this is Maggie. You know what? She is, I'm going to say the expert, one of the experts of, I call it trophy because it's a mouthful. So you say the big word and just tell me a little bit about you.
Yes, so Triple A Labs. I come from the UK. I've been a beekeeper for about 20 years. I work for the UK government I used to work for the National Bee Unit, so that's the UK government department that does honeybee health. We do foul brood, and we also have two statutory notifiable pests in the UK, so small hive beetle and Triple A Labs. I started working on Triple A Labs when I was with the National Bee Unit back in 2023, and really that was just to look at ways of detecting tropicolaps. We have central apiaries and things like that in the UK where we proactively monitor. And part of the inspection that we do is, we're going through colonies, we're looking for tropicolaps. And the first project I did was, how easy is it to detect tropicolaps in a colony? Is that inspection that we're doing as bee inspectors, does that actually work? And so the first idea was to go to somewhere that had tropicolaps and to try these different techniques. And of course that meant going to Thailand, so it was a tough job that somebody had to do, but I
Hold
took it.
on, just pause there. I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. So Maggie also told me that she's going back to Thailand February or March.
Yeah, in 15th 16th
And
of,
I
of
and I
February.
kind of
So
sneaky. I never said anything to anybody. I was like, I'd really like to go to Thailand. And their response, come on.
yeah. So we're hoping to work with the giant honeybee species in February. So there's not a lot of work done on these giant honeybee species. So they're the natural host of Tropicolaps. They're quite hard to study because they nest high up in trees and things like that. So I've spent the last month or so WhatsApping honey hunters and various different people
Very
in
cool.
Thailand and Indonesia, and we want to look at tropicolaps in their natural host just to kind of better understand what's going on there. North America had a near miss in the summer of
Yeah,
2025, so there
yeah,
was a giant honeybee colony on a cargo ship that almost docked in, I think it was Newark.
yeah.
It was destroyed when it was examined. It was found to be infested with tropicolaps. So it kind of shows how important not only understanding tropicolaps in Western honeybees, but there's these giant honeybees as well that can spread it. And
I would love to see those. Is it Apis dorsida? Is that how you say it?
yes, yeah, yeah,
Love to
yeah,
see them. Saw videos of them and how they flutter, and I think that's
yeah.
so very cool. I was thinking, how in the hell can I get these back in Newfoundland and put them in a box? But I don't think they
Yeah.
like boxes, do they?
No, they're definitely out in the open, and they're it's a big nest, like they're big bees. It's a big nest. I think photos and videos don't really do it justice
No.
when you see them out in the wild, and that it is, it's really impressive.
How long do you think that the Apis dorsida has been living with Tropy?
So millions of years.
Okay.
So if you kind of look at evolution and evolution of bees, there was an ancestral honeybee which kind of all of our, so in the West, so in Europe, Africa, the Middle East, we just have the Western honeybee. And that was then exported to North America, and we also exported the Western honeybee to Southeast Asia. So it's not native in Southeast Asia. But in Southeast Asia, there are, I think, 8 different species of honeybee. So you've got two giant species of honeybee, you've got two dwarf species of honeybee, and then there's 4 cavity nesting honeybees. But if you kind of look at evolution, there was an ancestral honeybee that got parasitized by something. Our Western honeybee had kind of separated off before then, but this ancestral honeybee went through evolution and it evolved into all of these different species of honeybee, and that parasite co-evolved along with it, and that's how you ended up. So you've got Varroa in those cavity nesting honeybees, and you've got Tropicolaps in the giant honeybee species. So they've always had parasites, they've co-evolved with them. Parasites don't want to kill their hosts, so it's only when Tropicolaps and Varroa jump species to Western honeybees that's when we have the problems, because the Western honeybees haven't co-evolved with them. They don't have these kind of mechanisms to deal with it. So
The giant honeybee, they're actually living with Tropy and not really killing them off. Is it true
yeah,
that I've read they have like developed different like cleaning mechanisms and hygiene in order to get the Tropy off? Different strategies, is
yeah,
that right?
yeah. I
Okay.
mean, we've done little things where we've had the bees in pots, and we've put in lots of Tropicolaps mites, so far more than you kind of naturally get with a natural infestation, and they immediately know it. So it was quite shocking. They released a lot of alarm pheromone. They all immediately started
Wow.
grooming themselves. If you do this with Western honeybees, so put them in a pot, put in a load of Tropicolaps mites, they kind of know that there's mites on them, that they'll try and groom themselves a bit, but the mites will hunker down in between like
Yeah.
the body segments and
Yes.
things like that, and the Western honeybees can't remove them. The giant honeybees, they will groom them off. They'll do things like they'll bite their legs off, they'll bite their bodies, and very very quickly they'll remove the majority
That's
of those
awesome.
mites.
Yeah.
So very much like Tropicolaps, when they're in these giant honeybee species, they're kept in control, and
Yeah.
they do other things like they migrate, so they have broodless
Yes.
periods, and they groom, and they've got all of these different sort of strategies that they use to deal with
So
Tropicolaps.
they've had to live with them over hundreds of years, right?
Yes,
And
yeah,
had to
yeah, exactly, yeah,
time to develop over that. So gosh, hundreds of years for the Western honeybee to get it down pat, to figure out how in the heck are we going to conquer this or keep it
yeah,
under
exactly,
control. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So I know I had a lot of questions, like when we talked about that container ship, like how long does Tropy actually survive out? Like it can be in a nest, but in cold. Like how cold can it get before it actually dies?
Yeah, so I think the thing is like, and certainly when I started researching Tropicolaps and doing the work on it, I assumed that more was known about Tropicolaps. And there's not actually that much that's known about it. There's quite a few bits of research from late 1990s, early 2000s, and then there was a bit of a gap, and then probably Sam Ramsey was sort of 20 late sort of 2018 2019. He did research, started doing research then, and more interest grew, but they're a very difficult mite to research. They're very small, they're very hard to handle, and things like that. So there's not that much out there. Probably 5 years ago, maybe even less than that, the common sort of perception was that Tropicolaps couldn't survive in broodless periods. So that's kind of been dispelled now, and that cargo ship. So the colony on the cargo ship was just the adult bees. They didn't have any comb, they didn't have any brood. The
Right.
Tropicolaps seemed to have survived for a couple of weeks, 2, 3 weeks on this ship. Yeah, so they were surviving on the bees. We don't know how they did that, but
Yeah.
they still managed to do that, and then that has implications for beekeeping in North America, in Europe, because the assumption was that in colder climates, so temperate
Yeah.
climates, you've got this tropical mite, they won't be able to survive, they won't be able to overwinter. Tropicolaps has spread to places like Korea, Russia, Uzbekistan, which has these colder winters. They are surviving the winter, but we don't really know what they're doing. So we don't know whether they go into a state of sort of suspended development, whether they leave the hive and they go on to another host, or whether they just kind of tough it out and they hang out in the hive over the winter. So, and not knowing those things makes it very difficult to advise beekeepers on what to do to control it, because as it spreads, beekeepers, they expect it to not come through the winter and not survive. I mean, Georgia, it's there's snow there at the moment. I've sort of messaged back and forth with beekeepers. They're kind of hopeful that this cold winter, and it's a particularly cold winter for Georgia this year,
Ah,
will help
interesting.
with the Tropicolaps numbers. We'll see.
Yeah.
March, April is on the horizon. They'll start going in colonies, and we shall find out.
So on Beehaven, we have so many different like skills and varieties of different beekeepers. Just so everybody knows, I mean, Tropy is a brood on the brood of honeybees. Okay,
Yes,
gets
yeah.
under the cappings and goes, has a little munch. And at the expo, I think we chatted. I was like, it's amazing how much damage the trophy can actually do to that brood. And I know Varroa bites, but this actually has more than one bites, right? On
Yeah,
the
yeah.
brood.
So with your varroa mite, you have your foundress female mites. So these mites reproduce within the brood. They're sealed in the brood cells. A varroa mite, the mother will set up a feeding site, and then
Yes.
her offspring will feed from that feeding site. And if you've got one or two foundress mites in that cell, you'll have one or two feeding sites on the brood. And varroa also have piercing mouth parts, so they actually make like quite a clean wound
Yes.
on the brood when they feed. Tropalaelaps, so they have like hooks and claws, so they have tearing mouth parts, and they just feed as and when they want to. So when very often you will pull out pre-pupae, pupae, even sort of that older, almost ready to emerge bees, and you can see those wounds. Also on the younger stages of brood, you've got your white pupae, and there's all of these brown marks, and that's wounds and that's scars that have been caused by the Tropalaelaps feeding, and that does kill a lot of the brood. But if it doesn't kill the brood, that deforms the bee as it sort of develops, and you have these bees that emerge out, and their proboscis is damaged, their antennae are damaged, that sort of thing, which means that they can't forage and they can't do all the things that they do in the colony as part of their natural life cycle. So just the way that they feed and that physical damage, it really increases the rate that the colonies collapse, and that's a big problem with Tropalaelaps, because you're in a lot of trouble. These beekeepers don't necessarily realize that they've got a Tropalaelaps problem before the colonies are dying. But with Varroa, you've got a bit more time. You can treat, you can do things, and that's part of the problem, and why Tropalaelaps, it's so worrying that it's spreading so quickly, because people need to kind of appreciate these. It's not Varroa. It's going to take different
And
skills and
different.
different strategies to deal with it, and people need to be prepared and know what's coming, but to have the
And
best
I think the
possible
thing is
chance.
education. Have a look at this and
Yeah,
have a look. I couldn't believe the difference because Auburn had a stand set up in the
yeah,
expo, and I went by and looked at the microscope, and I couldn't believe just because it was a trophy, but obviously it was dead. And it was pretty interesting. So, I mean, I know the yellow-legged hornet that was spotted in the States by just a beginner beekeeper, I think, sitting out by the hive and seeing something like going around the hive. I mean, very similar, like hopefully not, but this could happen to this. Like a beginner beekeeper could be a master beekeeper,
yeah,
could be doing a hive check and like see it. So I
yeah.
guess I know it's really difficult, I guess, to get a visual, but I mean, it's so much smaller than Varroa and it's a different movement, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
just, it runs across the frame.
yeah. They're very quick on the frame. They're a third the size of a Varroa mite, so they are. And particularly if you've got, you take your frame out, you're doing your regular inspection, you're looking for queen cells or whatever else you're
Yeah,
doing. If you're not specifically looking for
yeah,
Tropalaelaps mites, it's very easy to miss them, particularly at low levels. I've been doing a lot of work in, UK and Europe, just encouraging beekeepers to proactively monitor for Tropalaelaps. And yeah, every country in Europe, North America, Canada, they we all have inspection services, and they're all government people out there doing this at various levels depending on funding and things
yes,
like that. But whatever circumstance, that's just a handful of people, and generally they're stretched quite thin, and they've got other
yep,
things to worry about apart from Tropalaelaps. Beekeepers need to do this. They need to get in the habit of routinely monitoring
yep,
for Tropalaelaps. And it doesn't have to be every time you go in your hive. If you can do it once, twice, three times a season, there's various fairly simple monitoring
yeah,
techniques that you can use. And the other thing I'd say is if your colonies are sick and you don't really understand, it's not foul brood, and,
yeah.
and you don't really know what's going on, just check for Tropalaelaps, because I think unfortunately Europe, it will, it's on that landmass, it will just gradually spread, and it's going to be very difficult to contain it and control it. In the UK, in North America, Australia, places like that, we have that sea border between
Yeah,
us.
exactly.
Yeah,
I often say though, like when I think about like Varroa and all this, like bees move and they can only move
yeah,
so far. However, we humans we move them farther. So
yes,
we're part of the issue. So I guess are you seeing beekeepers kind of scaling back on ordering queens and ordering packages of bees from different areas in the world? Or has that not come to that yet? Is it still an open market for everyone to get whatever they want wherever?
I think I mean obviously each country varies, but generally the market is quite open, and I think obviously I'm quite immersed in Tropical Alaps. I talk about this
Yep.
most days, but I think what surprises me quite often is just the lack of awareness
Yeah.
about Tropical Alaps. I still turn up to associations and various beekeeping clubs and go, I'm going to do a talk on Tropical Alaps, and there's just this sea of blank faces, and people are
Exactly.
going, she's talking about what now, kind of thing, and getting that message out there, and just so that beekeepers, I mean, nobody wants to hear like Varroa is a problem, the yellow-legged hornets are a problem, small, there are all of these issues with beekeeping, and as beekeepers, it is very, it can be quite depressing at times, but don't just not think about these things because it's something uncomfortable to think about, and I think some cases I've come across people that are just reluctant to even accept that it will be coming, it will be an issue. I could be wrong. I think it will spread to the rest of Europe almost certainly.
Yeah.
UK, I think we're looking at a few years before it arrives in the UK. North America, you've just had a very near miss. Nothing to say that that couldn't happen tomorrow. You might have 10 or 20 years before it turns up.
Yes,
Nobody
exactly.
knows. But I think kind of worst case scenario is I'm wrong, and people have educated themselves about
Oh,
something, and no,
absolutely. You know
yeah,
what?
nobody really loses anything.
And
So
beekeeping, it's a never-ending learning career or hobby. You're always learning. And this is obviously an example of it. But when I think of that swarm that was on that container ship, how like that was close. Like
yes,
how
yeah.
that's pretty scary. Wow. Good for people on the boat to kind of like get that.
It was sort of taken down and frozen because that was the easiest
Yeah.
way for them to kill it on the boat, and then US Coast Guard responded, USDA responded, and they analysed that. So everybody did their job properly, and hats off to everybody that dealt with it. So it shows that the system can work, but if you look at the volumes of cargo ships and shipping containers and things like that get spread around the world, and Apis dorsata, they're a big bee, they're a big colony. It's probably they nest out in the open, so it's quite an easy thing to spot. You've got Western honeybees, which nest in cavities. If you look at a shipping container, it's all little nooks and
No,
crannies and
absolutely.
crevices.
Yeah.
You've got Eastern honeybees you've got the dwarf honeybee species.
Yeah.
So very lucky escape there. Everybody did their job fantastically well, but the
That's just
if you
one.
look at the kind of probability of just the number of things that are being moved around the world, then sooner or later, I think we,
Oh,
we
yeah.
we have a history of just spreading stuff absolutely everywhere. So I think unfortunately,
Yeah. So I'm in Newfoundland. You knew that anyway, I think. So we don't have Varroa. We say
yeah,
we don't have Varroa. We check our hives, back in 1980, government made a law that you weren't allowed to bring in any bees. That's good and bad. I obviously see the good part of it. We don't have Varroa. We don't have hive beetle. We don't have wax. We don't have a lot of different pests that people have to deal. We have weather, bad weather, and rats.
yeah,
Rats. So,
right,
but you know what? I know, and this sounds horrible, and some Newfoundlanders might like curse at me. It's going to come here eventually, like Varroa. Let's start with Varroa. I
yeah,
mean, it just takes one person to be a meathead and sneak in some bees across the ferry, and bam, we have Varroa.
yeah,
So, that just goes to show how simple it is. I mean, yes, it's a different pest, but it kind of transports the same way by
yeah,
humans.
yeah.
So I don't think anybody's safe wherever you are. I don't think
Absolutely.
anybody's safe. So when we look at, okay, so I did see lots of videos and we had lots of chats, but I guess the best way to look at your hives, I saw like the wax thing that you pulled off. That was pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
And just see if it's in the frame. So that's basically that and actually pulling out the larvae, right?
Yeah,
Two big
yeah.
ones.
So tropicolaps are in the brood. So ideally, you want to check the brood. So one of the techniques that I recommend, it was developed by a colleague of mine, Irakli Janesio. So he's a beekeeper and a researcher in Georgia. And when tropicolaps was first detected in Georgia, they needed a quick way to just kind of how higher the levels of infestation, how far has it spread. So yeah, he used wax hair
That's
depilation
pretty
strips, so
cool.
feet and things like that, which is very funny because Irakli is a very modest, very quiet guy, and to see him go into the Georgian sort of pharmacies and buy
I
these
was thinking,
wax
did he
strips
bring
is
that with him?
yeah, it's just it's the most
That's funny.
entertaining thing. But yeah, so those wax hair removal strips, if you have a frame of sealed brood, they peel apart, stick it on the sealed brood, and then literally just pull it off like
Wicked.
you'd be sort of waxing your legs or whatever else. And yeah, the Tropicalaps mites just kind of come out of the
Wow.
brood. There's videos online, there's videos on the
Yes, I
website, so
saw
you'll
that.
see that. But they're cheap. You can put them in your, in your kit with your smoker
That's
and your
great.
smoker fuel and things like that, and just get in the habit of checking. And it doesn't kill the brood, so if you do that technique, you can put the frame back in. The brood will still mature, it will
A
still
lot of people
emerge.
think it kills the brood. I think that's what a lot
Yeah,
of
no,
people feel. Yeah.
it's fine. That brood will still go on to mature, and you might lose one or two cells, but we've done this thousands of times, and
Absolutely.
yeah,
I
yeah,
saw
that's fine.
you in one of the videos and I thought I need to go help her. That's why I said I'm going to Thailand with you. You had a frame, you had your hat on, and it was a beautiful sunny day, and you were just sitting down on a stool and you were just picking every cell. And I was
Yeah.
like, I could do that.
Yeah. So I mean,
That's awesome.
everybody thinks research is glamorous, but I have sat in, Thailand, Georgia, various countries, just
Oh
sitting there
man,
literally with frames of brood, just pulling out
that's
cells
pretty right
and
on. That's
counting
cool. I could,
mites.
I'd give up social work for that. I really would.
Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
I shouldn't complain. So we did a formic acid trial in August, and I think for that, because I worked out how many cells we looked at, and 14,000 brood cells we biopsied, and we counted the mites, and we sexed the
Wow.
mites, and so yeah, it's
So
fun.
I guess we talked about how we find it, how we look for it. Okay, so you got it. Obviously, call your provincial APRS. That's what we have.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so call that person. They come. So there's been lots of conversations and new information coming out in regards how the heck do you treat this? So I did see the video. Oh my gosh, in Georgia they were very, very resourceful. Like I saw something for fleas for dogs, and they were using
Yeah.
that. So what is it now? Because I've heard so many different things. I heard formic acid, and then formic acid and something else, and then oxalic acid. So what is the new word on the street in regard to how do you kind of contain this if you have it, which we hope we don't.
Yeah. So the majority of treatments that as Tropicalaps has spread through Asia and into Europe, beekeepers have used Varroa treatments for Tropicalaps control. And the big issue with that is that the majority of Varroa treatments rely on that phoretic phase of Varroa mites. So Varroa, they'll be in the cells, they'll be
Yeah.
reproducing, that bee emerges, and then the Varroa mites will spend 5 days, 10 days ish outside of the brood on the adult bees. And that's that window of time that the active ingredients and a lot of chemical treatments come into contact with the Varroa mites, and that's what kills them. With Tropicalaps, though, they've got this really short phoretic phase, so you're looking at potentially less than 24 hours.
Wow.
So a lot of those chemicals, so things like amitrads, fluvalanates, flumethrins, they do kill the Tropicalaps mites, but there's just this short window of time for them to come into contact. So that means you need to leave the treatments on for much, much longer in the hives, and then you have issues with, so if it's a synthetic chemical, the mites will develop resistance to it.
Okay.
In Asia, they have lots of issue with like honey contamination and things
I
like that.
bet.
So, and
Yeah.
yeah, so it's not that straightforward. Formic acid, though, so that it's a very small molecule, so it can penetrate into the brood
Yes.
cells. That's
Yeah.
one of the few treatments that actually kills
That's
mites
good.
within the brood.
Mm.
So Asia, Georgia, the formic acid is used a lot. It's not a perfect treatment. It's quite a harsh treatment on the bees. It can kill queens.
Yeah.
It's variable with its efficacy. So if there's a very big nectar flow on and the bees are fanning a lot, that will fan the formic acid out of the heart. So there's all of these kind of different considerations for it. But formic acid kills the Tropicalaps mites
Yeah.
in the cells. And if you get the dosage right, then it's very effective. It doesn't sort of affect the bees or the queens. With a lot of treatments, that there are these
Correct.
parameters of the colony has to be a certain size, the ambient temperature has to be a certain thing. So formic acid looks like it's going to be a very good tool
Yes.
for controlling Tropicalaps. Then there's biotechnical methods. So brood breaks do
Yes.
help if Triple A labs spend the majority of the time in the brood. If you take that brood away, then obviously that's going to hinder their reproduction. The main issue with Triple A labs, whether you're using biotechnical or chemical treatments, is that their rate of reproduction is really fast. So
Glad you
we've had
mentioned
it,
that. I have to
yeah,
say, before you get it, how in the heck can they like fertilize themselves? That's what, is that true? Like I read
yeah,
that and it, like there's a big word what that means or what it
yeah,
says.
due to kinetic parthenogenesis.
Oh,
So
there you
female
go.
mites
Mouthful.
can for me. So
Okay,
yeah,
say that word again.
due to kinetic parthenogenesis.
So
So
smart, my friends. Okay. That means basically they can fertilize themselves.
yeah, so
Okay.
female mites, she can produce
That's
offspring,
wicked.
and she can produce male and female offspring, and they're viable. Like they're not sterile offspring. They can go on and reproduce.
Monsters.
I know, it's just
Holy crap, no wonder they're like reproducing like crazy. It's
yeah, and
crazy.
like with Varroa, obviously you've got that male mite in the cell, and they all have to mate and stuff.
Yeah.
Triple A don't have to do that. They can mate outside of the cells. They can mate in the cells. You have to be impressed by them though. Like
Yeah.
I mean, it's not their fault that they've ended up in
Yeah.
Western honeybees. This is like this is us doing this. They're just doing their things and they're adapting. And as a species, like they're a pretty cool little mite. I
Yeah, I
do,
know.
I
Well,
do
you
have
talked about the mouth parts, a hook.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
what the?
yeah.
So they're bad. We have to remember that. They're bad.
Yes,
Oh,
that.
but what about oxalic acid? Is that doing any?
So yes, so oxalic acid does work. Did a trial in Thailand, and we were using oxalic acid sublimators, and we did so repeated treatment. So every 3 days, 3 days or 5 days, every 3 days we treated the
Okay.
brood, and we did that for 25 days. And what we found was so as those bees emerged, the mites emerged, the oxalic acid would kill those emerging mites, but you still had those mites reproducing
Yeah.
within the brood.
Yeah.
And that so oxalic acid it kept the population at a constant for that 25-day window when we were treating, but as soon as we stopped treating, very quickly again the levels of mites increased. So it's that issue of not getting the majority of mites are in the brood, and you're just with the treatments that don't penetrate into the brood, you're just getting those phoretic mites that
So are
come
you
out.
thinking we might have to piggyback? Like have a thing of formic acid and then oxalic acid? Like is that what, or something we need to create something new? What are
Yeah,
your
I
thoughts?
think it will be much more labor intensive. I think triple A labs are very easy to kill, and in a way, like the treatments are more effective on them than Varroa. So it just like
Okay.
straight up lab experiments. If you're putting things in pots and seeing what kills them, they're easier to kill than Varroa. But it's just getting that treatment onto the mites.
Yeah.
That's the issue. So I think the reality of it, and this is sort of what I'm seeing in Georgia, is that it's just more labour intensive. You're having to treat more frequently. You're having
Yes.
to cage queens. And then, so you might like cage your queens while there's a nectar flow on and
Yeah.
leave them caged for 25, 30 days, and you've got that brood break. And then very often the beekeepers will then treat with oxalic acid when there's no brood at the end of it. And that buys you 6, 8 weeks until you need to start thinking about something else. So it's manageable, but obviously, like if you're a commercial beekeeper and you've
Oh,
got hundreds or thousands of hives,
that's tough.
extrapolating that, yeah,
Yeah.
20 hives, it's manageable. 20,000 hives, I don't know what the manpower and the labor that it will take will
Yeah.
make commercial beekeeping, very, very difficult.
Wow. Well, I'm hoping it will never get here. I'm
Yes.
hoping. I got on a flight last year. I was going to Reno, and Jeff Petites got on
Oh,
the
yes,
flight
yeah.
with me, and
Oh,
we were
dear.
sitting just next to each other in the lounge waiting to board the plane. And he said to me, he said, "You'll never have to worry about that." Now, this was like last year. So when I think about
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
and I think about how much education and how much more is known, like it can survive cold, right? Like
yeah.
cold weather. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
I'm
and
not really,
Jeff himself has started doing this work. So we
yeah.
call it diapause, where they can
Yes.
potentially enter these states of
Pretty
suspended
scary
development.
stuff.
So Jeff Pettis has looked at that. I think Jeff Williams from Auburn as well. Like
Yes.
they're looking at this kind of survival and overwintering. And I know Auburn University have this big just general project looking at brood and overwintering. And I think there's lots of sort of misconceptions about beekeeping, and that plays into to
Yeah.
tropolapse, because I know I've got a friend who's a beekeeper in Saskatchewan, and they participated in Jeff Williams's, so he's got a survey going on looking at winter brew production, and it was -20 degrees
Oh, I know,
Celsius,
right?
something like that. And
Yes.
my friend went through his hives and he had brood present.
Isn't
It
that
wasn't very
crazy?
much. Yeah, it wasn't very
Wow.
much brood, but I think, beekeepers assume that you have these brood breaks over the winter, but you don't necessarily have them. And then that does play into, if
Yeah.
Tropicolaps gets here, we can't rely on brood breaks and that winter period to keep us safe.
So when you go back over to Georgia or Thailand, main goal of that trip, just to learn more? Are you going to be experimenting with the medications more to see if like, so what is the main goal for that when you go
Yeah,
back?
so Thailand and Indonesia, we're looking at those giant
Okay.
honeybee species, and we want to look at what happens because nobody knows when these bees migrate and they have broodless
Yeah.
periods. Nobody knows where the Tropicolaps mites go. So it's literally just sampling the bees and seeing if there are
Okay.
mites on them or have they gone somewhere else, and looking at how the rates of reproduction in the giant honeybees differ from our western honeybees. So just a better kind of handle on
Absolutely.
what's happening between the two different honeybee species. And then in Georgia, so we did a lot of work on treatments and control in 2025. Beekeepers there really need effective treatments for Dropilaelax. Like, they're struggling at the moment. So a big part of 2026 is looking at those treatments. But we're also looking at things like, so what we've noticed is that the bees that exhibit like hygienic behavior to control
Yep.
varroa mites, those colonies seem to have higher levels of Tropicolaps. And what we're thinking is that kind of decapping, recapping behavior that helps to control varroa might actually be speeding up Tropicolaps reproduction. So they're opening the cells, they're letting these mature, so you have more mature mites earlier in the bees' development cycle. So by opening a cell, that releases the mature Tropicolaps mites, which can then go on and reproduce. And with Varroa, that kind of brood decapping will damage the nymphs and the immature Varroa mites. It doesn't seem to do the same for Tropicolaps, but it's very early days. So we want to actually drill down into that and you see, does it affect reproduction? Do they eventually die and stuff? Because if what we're seeing is right and it's not just some sort of weird fluke, then potentially, it's not great to have bees that are varroa tolerant that are actually increasing Tropicolaps. So
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
we need to get a handle on that, and then just general, biology, behavior, overwintering, things like that. So I think every time we find something out about Tropicolaps, I think that generates probably 6 or 7 or 8 other questions and just the
So how
list of
many
things.
people are going with you?
So to Thailand, there'll be myself, Jeff Wilson from Canada. He's coming out to Thailand, and Kevin, so one of the guys I work with. So there'll just be 3 of us, and
So
we're
who's
working with
who's
local.
Jeff? Is he from Saskatchewan?
He's a Saskatchewan provincial apiarist
Yeah, I
for.
met him. He's
Yeah, so
fabulous.
Jeff's great. Yeah, so
Oh,
Jeff sat in various rooms with me uncapping brood.
he's
He's
so
also
awesome.
he was part of the 14,000 brood cells that we Jeff did a good
You
percentage of
probably
them.
will not remember me because it was a lot long. It wasn't that long. It was in Calgary. There
All
was
right,
a
yeah,
conference there. And I started chatting with him, and it was just amazing listening to him because they get so cold there. We get
exactly.
cold, but they get like deep freeze cold, like
Yeah,
-40 stuff. We don't get that here. So I
yeah,
just found that so interesting for him, but he's a wonderful guy.
yeah,
So just to close up, if you could say two things
yeah.
to new beekeepers or any beekeper on behaving about trophy, what would it be?
Um,
Thanks.
so educate yourself. So on the Fire Science website, on the Auburn University website, I mean, even if you just Google Tropicolaps, there are
Yes,
videos out there on what they look like, how they behave. So just I think watching the videos really helps because
agreed.
if you've seen it in a video and you see something similar in your hive, you're more likely to kind of make that connection in your head and go, okay, perhaps there's an issue here. And like I said, if as many beekeepers as possible can proactively start monitoring,
Exactly.
hopefully we'll never ever find it. But just for the sake of having some wax strips and
Pretty easy.
uncapping a bit of brood,
Yeah.
it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes out of your beekeeping cycle. If beekeepers can do that, I think that's the best chance that we have of detecting it early enough to potentially eradicate it when it arrives somewhere new. So, yeah, don't just sort of sit back and expect the government or other people to take on that responsibility. We should all be out there looking and checking and being aware. So yeah, go buy some beet.
So I do have to say I'm a big fan of your Facebook site and your website for the FARA. I share absolutely everything you post, so keep posting. I'll just keep sharing.
Thank you.
But it's just education. I think that's the most
Yeah,
important thing. So
yeah.
you are awesome. Like this is a
Thank you.
wonderful way to start my Friday, kind of ease in through it. Coffee. So this is wonderful. And you're so bright, and I love your sweater.
Thank
Like
you.
awesome. So anyway, you're fabulous. Thank you for taking the time. And it's so
Well,
good to see you.
yeah. Well, thank you, Raylan. It's really great to talk to you and to for your followers to be able to hear a bit about Tropical
Yeah,
Labs. So
we
really
post it
appreciate the
everywhere.
opportunity.
So I put it on Facebook, but I'm also trying to make the leap to YouTube. So and it's just anywhere I can just get it out to educate people. That's what I'm all about, because people need
Brilliant.
to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you keep in touch, my friend, and if you got any news or anything new and exciting, tell me,
Will
and I'll
do.
kind of bawl and scream and on behave and let everybody know. I want you to have a
Fantastic.
great
Thanks.
day.
You too.
You're awesome. Take care.
Take care
Bye-bye.
now. Bye now.
Bye. You're fabulous.
Use that.